Welcome to Liverpool FC Journal, guys. I'm W. James. This is your Liverpool news update. You know what? There's a saying, isn't there? I think it was in the Batman movie. I think it was Harvey Dent that said it. You either die a hero, you live long enough to become the villain. You evolve or you die, is another saying. Are Liverpool at that place now where we need to evolve as a team to become relevant again, to get back to where we were last season? Does the team need to change its focus? Does it need to change the way it plays? Does it need to build for the future? Do we need to admit that this season is a transition season and maybe we won't win the amount of trophies we were hoping for at the start of this season? Maybe we're in all these different places. Now, this video we're going to talk about someone who, let's face it, this is going to get the fan base divided. It's going to cause some hate from some people. It's going to cause some controversy in others. And we're going to talk about this man here. We're going to talk about Mohamed Salah. Look, I think Mo is in a very interesting position. You know, Mo last season was absolutely fantastic. He was outstanding. You know, it was very much the reason why we won the league to some degree, along with obviously the very solid defence that we had. Salah, look, will go down in history as one of the greatest Liverpool players ever. Look, I'm not one of those people that puts him as the greatest. I still would suggest and say that, you know, that Ian Rush would be, or that Kenny Dalglish would be, that they would be my greatest ever Liverpool players. You know, look, I think Salah, the criticism that he's had this season and the debate over him is stronger than ever. And look, I think that's very much in the modern world in which we live. You know, if I go back to when I started watching football back in the days, you know, when John Barnes, Peter Beardsley, Kenny Dalglish, Ian Rush, Steve McMahon, Alan Hansen, Mark Lawrenson, Stevie Nicol, Ronnie Whelan, Bruce Grobbelaar played, you certainly didn't have the debate, or you weren't as aware of it. You know, the talk about football was what you talked about with your mates on a Monday at school if you were school age, or Monday at work if you were at work. You know, the news you got was through you know, the TV, through watching either of the two main channels, or watching Grandstand or Football Focus or Match of the Day. You know, it was through reading the newspapers. That you certainly didn't have the absolute 24/7 crescendo of news and fan media that you've got these days. So, you know, I just think we weren't as aware, obviously, of any criticism of players back then that we are now. And I don't subscribe to this view that you shouldn't criticise Mo under any circumstances because he's Mo Salah. That, for me, makes you a happy clapper. You know, at the end of the day, it's your right as a fan to criticise a player's performance. If a player's not performing, criticise the way he's playing. Don't criticise him as a person. That's when it becomes unacceptable. That's when it becomes uncalled for. Now, look, Mo Salah this season has not performed very well at all. I think you can list perhaps on 2-3 fingers how the good games that he's played. And I get the argument about Salah that he's still a world-class talent, that he can still produce in one instance a moment of magic that could win you a game or draw you a game. You know, I get that, I understand that. But overall, the performances that he's put in have been appalling. And what annoys me to some degree with Slot this season has been there's been an unaccountability there. You know, the fact that certain players can be as awful as they want to be. You know, the likes, obviously, of Ibu Konate, Mo, have been appalling at times, yet never substituted. It doesn't make any sense to me, or very rarely dropped, for example. And I get that partly is due to the fact that maybe there isn't the options there. You know, for me, Chiesa could come in and play there, but the manager doesn't like Chiesa for whatever reason. But, you know, Liverpool in a very interesting position. There was a story that got me thinking on this, which was a discussion that was had about would you accept an offer for Salah in the summer. You know, talks that the Saudis are very much still sniffing around Mohamed Salah, that they're very much interested. They may even come back with a £100 million bid in the summer for the player. Would you accept that bid? And I'll be honest with you, and this may seem sacrilege to some, I would accept the bid. I really would. And the reason I'd accept the bid is, for me, it's time for Liverpool to start building for the future. To understand that Mo Salah is 33 years old. He isn't going to get better. He's not going to get back to the levels of previous seasons because Father Time is unbeatable. Father Time is unconquerable. Father Time always wins. And Salah, to me, is in a position where he is declining as a player and declining as an influence on the team. And there's been times this season when he hasn't played that we've looked better. We've looked more aggressive, we've played quicker, we've had a better balance to the side, the Frankfurt away game, for example. Now, yes, I get the argument that, well, it's no point talking about it now because in a few weeks' time we'll get to see a Salah-less Liverpool when he's off with Egypt to the AFCON for as many as 5-6 weeks, depending on how Egypt, of course, perform in that tournament. And I get that, but to me, that's not an argument. You know, for me, as a football fan and as a football player back in my youth, the one thing I was always taught was you got your shirt based on how you were performing. And if you played well, you kept your shirt. If you played badly, you lost your place in the team. Now, the comment that's been made as well is, what if Salah goes off to AFCON? We play really well for those 5-6 weeks that he's away, win every single game, but he then walks straight back into the side, which he shouldn't do just because he's Mohamed Salah. If we're playing really well, if say we'd signed Semenyo in January, for example, and he comes back and he plays for us and he's brilliant, should Salah walk back in? Of course he shouldn't. But there is an argument that now we're in a place where last summer Liverpool spent nearly £500 million on new players. And it should be about building for the future, because realistically, Salah won't be any better next season. In fact, he may be worse. He may not even be here next season. Who knows? That we need to build this team for the future. We may need to maybe accept that this is a transition season where we don't win the trophies that perhaps Liverpool were meant to win this season. This team needs to be built around Isak, Ekitike, Wirtz, the new players that have come in. Yes, I know that, say, Isak and Wirtz haven't performed to the levels that we'd expected of them yet, but maybe that's because of how they're being used or what they've been expected to do, or, a whole plethora of reasons. But, and Hugo's been great, but we do need to kind of look at how we can build that team without Salah. Like I said, he isn't going to be here for the long term. And yes, that opportunity will come, of course, when he's off at AFCON. But my argument is this, that Mo, yes, is a great man. Yes, Mo was a great player, but he's no longer at that level. And I hope I am completely like an idiot that he comes back after the international break, blows Forest away, blows Sunderland away, blows Leeds away, blows Brighton and West Ham all away, and PSV and Inter, and we go, wow. And then he goes off to AFCON and we go, oh, what a shame he's gone. I hope that happens. I don't think it will, because, medical science and all that. But we're honestly at that place now, guys, where we do need to look to the future. And I honestly believe that this team needs to start to build without Mohamed Salah, to use him less, to use him from the bench more, to not play him in those games that we need to win, to perhaps only play him against those lesser teams in the Premier League, because he's not at the level he used to be. He's certainly not of the ability he used to be. And how can we give this team a chance to gel and be ready for the next 2-3 years? Because Salah ain't going to be here for the next 2-3 years. Whereas Wirtz, Isak, Ekitike, Semenyo, if he comes, is, Sobo, hopefully, Grav, all these players will be here. And for me, now is the time to move on. Not to move on, sorry, I'll rephrase that. To look for different ways to use Salah, to perhaps not bring him on, not to have him there from the start always, to not always play him for the full 90, to use him in different ways. But for me, it's time to move on. It really is, in terms of him starting every single game, because he's just not at that level. And at times, it's like we're carrying a player. We're kind of shoehorning someone in because he used to be Mo Salah and he no longer is. And that, for me, is the wrong reason. Guys, let me know your thoughts on this topic. Let me know your thoughts on Mo Salah and the best way going forward to use him. Guys, thank you for watching the Liverpool FC Journal. If you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share and subscribe to the channel. And I'll catch you on the next one.